Guys, so I'm sorry that I'm not in today, but here's a really quick, easy video to do a lot of the stuff. I'm going to be using my calculator for most of this, but most of it you can also do in your head. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to log into your iTunes U. And the notes that I'm getting will be, they will also be filled out and sent to you guys. So we're under graphs of trigonometric functions and sine and cosine, and we are taking student notes, so number 4. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about transformation. So if you look on the first one, it talks about what sine and cosine look like. But what we're going to do is we're going to start by filling out these two tables. So I'm going to go to my calculator, and in y equals, I'm going to hit sine of x. And under the second one, I'm going to hit 2 sine of x. Okay. Now, for my table set and my table, there's going to be something I'm going to do a little differently. So I'm going to hit second table set. We're starting at 0, but notice that we're going up by 90s in this case. So I'm going to, delta table means the change in the table. So we're going to go up by 90 each time. All right. And so I'm going to go second table. And this gives me my value. So now I'm able to just fill them in. So notice for both of them, sine of 0 is 0. And we have 1, but for 2 sine it's 2, 0, -1, -2, and then it comes back to 0. All right. I'm going to also hit my graph function just to kind of give me an idea of what these look like. Now this isn't showing me a whole lot of data, so I'm going to adjust my window. So we noticed that the smallest possible value was -2 and the largest was +2. So you can kind of mess with your window if you'd like. So I know I'm going between -2 and 2, and maybe you want to do the same for these where you're going from 0 to 360 and you're going up by 90s. Okay? So when I graph it, it'll actually fit. Not actually. Sorry, I made a slight error here. So it's 0 to 360 on your x-axis, and you're going up by 90s. And then our y's are between -2 and 2. There we go. So the blue one is going to be our sine of x. And our red is going to be our 2 sine of x. So if you're looking at these, you'll notice that they kind of follow the same trajectory, except there's a slight difference. So I'm going to go ahead and plot those points. So it goes from 0 to 1 to 0 to -1 to 0 for just sine of x. But for cosine of x, it's going to go 0, 2, 0, -2, 0. Okay. So what do you notice about the two graphs? Where are they similar? Where are they different? So they have the same curve, but the number in front of the sine determines how high and how low. So they have the same curve, but the number in front of sine determines how high or how low something goes. So if we were to predict these ones, we would say that this goes all the way up to 3, comes back down, goes all the way down to -3, and then comes back up. This one's a little more tricky because it's a -4, okay? It's actually going to start by going down to -4, and it'll come all the way back up to +4 before coming back down. So you'll notice that it kind of does the opposite of the curve that we're used to seeing. It goes down first versus going up first. So this number in front of the trigonometric function is known as the amplitude. Okay, so if we were to graph these two functions, you could easily do it in your graphing calculator, but it might be a little faster for you to just do it by hand. So for this one, we have that -2. So I know that I'm going to start at 0, go down to -2, come back up, go up to +2, and come back down. Now you could easily check this in your graphing calculator if you wanted to. For this one over here, we have 1/4. So now this one's going to be a really tiny shift. So up to 1, up to 1/4, excuse me, down to 0, down to -1/4, and back up. So this one's going to be a really, really tiny curve. So this is what we call the amplitude. Now we're going to look at something different. So you'll notice now that the number is instead inside. So I'm going to go over to my graphing calculator and I'm going to change it to be cosine of x and cosine of 2x. Okay, I'm going to go to my table to see my values. And if I look at cosine, it goes 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. So that again is 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. The cosine of 2x is 1, -1, 1, -1, 1. Okay? It might help to see these graphed to see where the real differences lie. So the blue one, of course, is going to be our regular cosine function. So we start at 1, go down, and come back up. But you'll notice with the red that we're going to have two whole U's, so two ups and downs in the same period of time. So instead of going every 90, we're going to be going every 45. So at 45, it's going to hit 0, and 90, it's going to hit -1 before it comes up at 135 and up to 1 at 180. Okay? Now you could easily continue the graph if you wanted to. Okay. Now, what do you notice about the two graphs? Where are they different? Where are they similar? So this one is the same curve, but we had two in the same span as one. So what I mean when I say that same curve, but we had two in the same span as one. Notice that we were able to do two full rotations in the same span as for the original function, we were just able to do one. So if we were predicting down here, I would say I would be able to do 4 full rotations, or you could think of it as going 1, 2, 3, 4 in the same time it would take it to do 1. Now with the half is where it gets a little tricky. You're only going to be able to do half of a full rotation. So if you think of your standard one being like this, I'm only going to be able to go down in when it's 1/2 x. So let's look at some examples of this. This is better known as the period. So the period, a full period is 360 degrees or 2 pi. So you could write that. So to find the period, what you're going to do is take either 360 or 2 pi and divide by this number the front of the x. It's known as b. So you could say if sine of bx equals y. So b is going to be the number in front of x. So let's look at this one. Now there's two transformations here. We know that it's going to go up to 2 and that I will have 2 completed in one rotation. So what I like to do normally to help myself out is sketch the normal function first. All right, so that's my sine of x. Now I know this 2 in front is going to make it go up to 2 and down to -2. All right. And then lastly, I know this 2 here means this whole thing. So this whole thing is going to be scrunched. So I can have 2 in it. So it would need to ideally be like 1, 2. So I'm going to make that look a little better. And at the 45s, condense my points. So here, up to 2, down to 90, down to 135, and back to, up to 180. So now that is what it would look like. And I can do another rotation. You can always erase these as well. So if these were starting to confuse you, you can always do that as well. You can also always check yourself in your graphing calculator. So this one here, we now have cosine. So we know that starts up top and comes down and back up. And we know that we have this 4. So it's going to go up to 4 and down to -4. So if I'm going to draw that, start up at 4, down, down and back up. But now we also have this 4 in the x, so that means that all of this is going to happen in 4 times. Well, at 180, that would be we would be able to have 2 rotations. So now we're going to have to do it in a quarter, which is 90. So we will need to do a full rotation in this space here. So I'm still going to start at 4 and I'm going to end at 4. But midway through, I'm going to be at -4 and those points in between. I'm going to be able to do a full rotation. So you kind of think of it as squeezing all of the pieces together. And you could easily remove this to help you see it better. Right? So this practice page I want you to try on your own, whether it's putting into your graphing calculator or kind of looking at the points. Notice that you have a negative in front of some of these and a quarter, as well as a 2 in front of the x's. Once you finish that, there's one last thing that I want to talk about, and this is by far the easiest one to me. So I'm going to go back into my y equals, and I'm going to type my sine of x up for y1 and sine of x, and then I'm going to close my parentheses and put +2. So please make sure you're closing your parentheses here. Go into my table. Now I already know that my sine of x is going to be 0, 1, 0, -1, 0. But when I do +2, my points are 2, 3, 2, 1, 2. So what does that mean graphically? Well, our original sine curve is pretty easy. So 0, 1, 0, -1, 0. So that's going to be my sine of x curve. But for this one, it's not really showing right here. So I'm going to go to, oh, I can see it right at the top here. So I'm going to adjust my window. We said that 3 was our highest, but I'm just going to go up to 5 just so I can see it a little clearer. So there's the one we just drew. And there's that one up top there. So I'm going to plot those points again. So they were 2, 3, 2, 1, 2. All right. So my question to you again is, what do you notice about the two graphs? Where are they different? Where are they similar? So it's the same graph, only shifted up 2. So if you look at our graphs, you'll notice it's the same exact one, almost like a stamp image. It's just moved up. So if we're looking at these, this is going to be shift up 3. And this one, because it's negative, this is going to be shift down 2. So let's look at some examples. This number here is known as the shift. So it's the number that follows the x. All right. So I'm going to start by graphing both my regular sine and cosine functions for these. So 0, 1, 0, -1, 0. So this is our original function for sine. And for cosine, it's 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. And then I'm going to look at the number in front. So this is 2. So that means it's going to go as high as 2 and as low as -2, but these other points here are not going to change. Okay, so now I'm going to erase those. And then lastly, it says that it drops 4. So I'm going to bring everything down 4. So from here, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And I know that's going to go up. It's the same. This one's going to be slightly off the graph and then back on. So this green is going to be our final graph. So I can erase all this if I'd like. So that's all of the changes that that's going to go through. So I'm going to do the same for this one. Now I have this 1/2, so that means that it's not going to go as high or as low. So I'm going to erase all the blue. And then it moves up 1, so everything's just going to shift up 1. And then I can erase this, and that's my final graph. Now on the last page, there's practice. Notice how some of them have all the shifts. Some of them might only have 2. This one only has 2. This one has all of them. But just refer back to these previous slides, or just put it in your graphing calculator if you're unsure as to where to find any and all of this information. But the things we talked about were amplitude, period, and vertical shift.